everything that I teach in this work, I've used myself. It has helped me. So in the 10-year journey of teaching boundaries, I got to a place where I went, we need a pause before I just hop everybody into this boundary system. Because like I said earlier, if you don't believe that you have the right to matter and take up space and have limits in your life, boundary setting is a bust. It's going to feel like you're climbing Mount Everest on your own. That's not what we're here to do. Okay, so these emotional rights are the foundation of your boundary setting. They are your baseline. Your inner yes and your inner no start here. If you have ever struggled with setting or holding boundaries, which I'll assume everyone on this planet has, start here. Start by reclaiming your right to exist, to feel, to have needs, and to protect yourself. Welcome to Grow with Robin Breckenridge, a podcast about stepping into the most fully expressed, aligned, and conscious version of yourself. Here, we dive into the real work of personal growth, establishing boundaries, understanding your patterns, building self-trust, healing emotional wounds, and creating relationships that feel safe, authentic, and fulfilling. I'm Robin, a life and relationship coach, and in each episode, we'll explore the tools, insights, and conversations that will help you not just improve your life and relationships, but truly transform them. You don't have to just go through it. Let's grow through it, and let's do it together. Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. If you are here after last week's episode on boundaries, you are brave. And I just wanted to say thank you for continuing this journey with me and for showing back up. That conversation was personal and we covered a lot of information. And if you're anything like me, it probably got you thinking. Because once you start setting boundaries, some other things get stirred up, like questions, ones we don't always know how to answer. Like, what am I allowed to even need in my relationships? What am I allowed to ask for? And underneath that, what do I believe I deserve? That's why today we're talking about something that I wish was taught in every classroom and in every home, your basic emotional rights. Because when you don't know what you're allowed to ask for, it's hard to set boundaries at all. And when you don't know your rights, you'll end up negotiating your worth. But here's the truth. Boundaries are not just about what you say no to. They're about knowing what you have the right to say yes to. I'm going to repeat that. They're about knowing what you have the right to say yes to. And what you're saying yes to, it's beautiful. You're saying yes to peace, to mutual respect, to aligned relationships. You're saying yes to rest without guilt. Yes to speaking your truth, and yes to having needs and not apologizing for them. Yes to walking away from dynamics that deplete you, and yes to changing your mind as you grow. Yes to being seen, valued, and treated like you matter. So today, we're going to walk through 7 emotional basic rights that every human being has available to them in any relationship, if you so choose. But so many of us never learned them. And we're not just going to name them today. We're going to reclaim them today. So why am I teaching this before the boundary pyramid? Because guess what? That's up next in the next episode. I'm teaching this because before you can build strong boundaries, you have to believe you're allowed to have them. And for most of us, we weren't raised to believe that, or it just wasn't modeled to us growing up. We were raised to keep the peace, to be agreeable, to meet other people's expectations of us, and to not check in with our own internal truth and needs. And that's not your fault. Sometimes it's generational, cultural, but for sure, it was a survival strategy. It means that many of us never got a clear message about what we're allowed to feel, need, or say. So I remember one specific moment in my own life where I, attempted to do it differently, and for myself in a past version of me, maybe I would like leave before I told you how I felt or told you that you crossed a boundary, or I would just push it down. So there was one specific moment where I remember I tried to speak up about something that hurt me in a friendship. And the response I got, it wasn't caring or curious, it was defensive. And I remember I started to shrink mid sentence. And I think I even said, like, my therapist told me to say this because I started to like back down because of the way the person was responding. And in that moment, my nervous system was telling me, like, this is dangerous. Like, you don't get to need these things that you're asking for. And those are the kind of beliefs that become ingrained in us and even override our own logic. We confuse having needs with being needy, and that gets a bad rap. There's an amazing quote. I believe it's from the book Attached, but it basically says, you're only as needy as your greatest need. So when I have clients come to me and they say, well, I don't want to be needy. Well, guess what? We're all needy. We all have needs. We're human. Needy gets a bad rap, but it's a part of being human. So today, I want to walk you through the 7 core basic emotional rights that are afforded to you in every relationship if you so choose. That means your romantic relationships, your friendships, yes, even work, your familial relationships. But these are not privileges. They are your internal compass. And when you remember them, your boundaries stop being so scary. They start being self-evident. So let's go through each one by one. Let's start with one of the hardest and I think the most transformative rights to reclaim: the right to say no without carrying guilt. This is hard when your worth has been wrapped up in being accommodating, when you were praised for being easygoing or low maintenance, and when your version of love meant being agreeable. But your yes doesn't mean anything unless your no is also an option. And I know for myself that I used to feel like sick in my body after saying no. Like I had for sure done something wrong. But I've learned that sometimes discomfort isn't always a sign that you're doing something bad. It's often a sign that you're doing something new. A boundary is just a declaration that you exist and you matter. You don't need a crisis to justify it. You don't need a spreadsheet of proof. You are allowed to take up space and say no just because your peace matters. Now, my amazing social media marketing angel, Megan, and I were talking about boundaries and the podcast, and she brought up a really good point. She was like, well, I don't understand. Like, I'm a little confused because sometimes we have to say yes, even when we don't necessarily want to do something or it's not an authentic yes. And Megan is absolutely right. None of this is, black and white or spoken in absolutes. There's nuance to things. And part of being in relationships mean that we will be called to compromise at times. But either way, even compromise needs a relationship with yourself. So you can at least check in and go, it might not be an authentic yes, but I want to support this person. This might not be an authentic yes, but I'm going to choose to step into the next living action and go to this particular thing anyways. That's all good. And she's absolutely right. It needs to be said on this podcast that like, hey, we're not talking in absolutes. It's not like, hey, if I never want to do anything, I don't show up, because then that would mean we're not compromising in our relationships. I'm more speaking to the habitual default settings of saying yes when you mean no, not even checking in with yourself, or saying yes habitually because you don't know how to manage guilt and fear. Okay. So if you didn't listen to last week's episode, I would tune in because I talked a lot about guilt and setting boundaries. But remember, guilt means I did something bad. And a great question to ask yourself when guilt comes up is, am I doing something bad by my standards? And what these basic rights are about is your standards. Now, these are just examples, everyone that I'm going to go over. And there's so many more basic rights we could add into this list. But I like to start with these core basic rights because they're basically an invitation for you to own your own standards and relationships. It's really hard to have boundaries if we don't have our own set of internalized standards. So when we ask that question, am I doing something bad by my standards? Bad meaning out of my integrity. And when I can, kind of zoom out a little bit, because sometimes I can go, I said no, and this person's disappointed. That might be doing something bad. But when I really check in with what I'm doing, I'm not just saying no to be a jerk. I'm saying no because I'm honoring myself, or I'm honoring my bandwidth at the time, or I'm honoring my truth. So then I can ask myself, okay, Robin, is honoring your truth bad by your standards? Is honoring your bandwidth bad by your standards? Well, listen, at this point, no, none of that is ever bad. And I'm making a declaration on this podcast because I know some of my friends listen to this. Please don't show up to anything that I do out of guilt or fear. I don't want that stank ass energy around me. Please take care of yourself. And these basic rights are like the golden rule. If they're my basic right, they're your basic right too. Okay. So I want everyone in my life to take care of themselves. In fact, I had something planned for a little while with a friend just this past weekend. And it became complex for her. Her daughter had something going on, and it happened to fall on Mother's Day evening. And she wrote me a text like, I'm so sorry. I think I might need to back out, but I don't want to screw you over because we had bought tickets for something. And my response to her was, take care of you. I will figure it out. And guess what? My mom and I went. We had a lovely day together. Everything was okay. And even if I didn't find anyone else to go to that particular event with, I can handle my own disappointment. It's going to be okay. But that declaration is everybody gets to take care of themselves in my life, even if it disappoints me. Okay, so I want you guys to think about this basic right. And I want you to start to reflect. What are you saying yes to out of guilt? And what would it feel like to let that guilt be an invitation to get curious with yourself? So the next basic right. Let's talk about one of the most essential and often overlooked emotional rights. You have the right to be treated in a way that you feel is respectful. And I'm not talking about just the surface level kind of like, oh, please and thank you and fake politeness. I mean real respect. The kind that is reflected not just in words, but also in action. The kind that feels safe in your body. The kind that says, I feel seen, heard, and like I matter. So it shows up in the pause someone takes before they respond to you, and how they make space for your truth and your feelings, even when it's uncomfortable. It's in how they handle conflict, take accountability, and how they treat you when they're not getting their way. And here's the hard part. If you weren't raised with respect, or if you were taught that being nice was more important than being honest, you may have learned to believe that respect is something that you have to earn. If I'm easier, quieter, more helpful, maybe then they'll treat me with care. And I have been there myself. If I had $1 for every time I hustled for respect in various relationships in my life, I would be recording this episode from a yacht in the south of France. Okay, I totally get it. But here's the thing. I wasn't asking for too much. I was asking the wrong people. Because mutual respect, it's not a reward for being small enough to keep other people comfortable. It's the baseline for any relationship that is worth keeping. You have the right to be in spaces where you don't have to audition for your dignity, where your boundaries don't push people away. They deepen the connection, where being fully yourself isn't too much. It's the whole point. So I want you to think about in your life where you have tolerated disrespect or where you're currently tolerating disrespect. And remember, I'm going to keep bringing some of the same concepts up if you're listening to every episode. Tolerating and patience are two different things. Sometimes in relationships, we choose to be patient. Maybe our partner is working something out or is doing some deeper work or is working on shifting some patterning. Patience and tolerating, two different things. Patience comes from love and it doesn't have an endless waiting period. There is some sort of parameter around it. Tolerating comes from fear. And if any of you can relate to tolerating in your relationships, you will be full of resentment. So I want you to think about what would it be like in those dynamics if you stopped negotiating your worth. Let's talk about a right that most people were never directly given, and yet it sits at the center of emotional safety. I have the right to have needs, and they are as valuable as the needs of others. Ooh, okay. I have to repeat that second part. They are as valuable as the needs of others. Your needs are not a burden. They are your internal compass. They are a communication from your inner world. To need is to be human. Remember, we are only as needy as our greatest need. Needs are not flaws to fix. They are invitations to connect more deeply with yourself and with others. And also, I know we haven't talked about parts of self-work yet, which would be the inner child, the inner teenager, but needs are a direct communication from younger, wounded parts of us. You have the right to need space. You have the right to need comfort, to need reassurance, affection, freedom, clarity, rest, autonomy. And you don't need the approval of others for your needs to be valid. They don't need to be convenient for someone else to matter. But if you grew up in a home where your needs were minimized, mocked, ignored, or no one in your family system had the capacity for them, this particular basic right might feel exceptionally hard. You might have internalized the belief that your needs make you too much, or that they're selfish, or that someone else's discomfort matters more than your well-being. You may even find yourself thinking, I shouldn't need that. I should be over this by now. And please don't should on yourself. I love the quote, should is just an argument with reality. Should is shaming. We don't need it. But I want you to hear this clearly. You are allowed to have needs, even if they inconvenience someone. And they are just as important as the needs of everyone else around you. Not more important and not less important, equally important. You don't lose your right to have needs just because someone else has louder ones. You don't have to disappear in order to belong. Your needs do not make you needy. They make you human. So if something feels persistent or loud inside of you, it's not because you're broken. It's not because you're too much. It's because something inside of you still wants to be cared for. So I want you to consider these two questions. What need are you judging yourself for? And what would shift if you honored it instead of hiding it? Now, there's a specific kind of burnout that doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from trying to be who everyone else thinks you should be. So this leads me to the next right. You have the right to not have to meet other people's unrealistic expectations of you. Notice the word unrealistic. You are not responsible for living up to someone else's fantasy version of you. Not your parents' projection, not your partner's ideal, not your boss's pressure, not society's definition of success. You are allowed to choose a life that actually fits you and is in alignment. Even if it's quieter, if it's different, if people don't understand it, if it disappoints people who only loved the version of you that they could control. Performing your way through life will always cost you something, and it's usually your authenticity and eventually your peace. Because the more you bend to try to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be, the further you drift from your own truth. Unrealistic expectations can sound like you should always be available. You should never say no. Now, of course, sometimes and most of the time people aren't saying this. This is the unsaid expectation. You should be over that by now. You should prioritize us, even if it hurts you. But you are not here to play a role that keeps other people comfortable. You are here to live an aligned, fully expressed life. So I want you to think about this. Where in your life are you carrying someone else's unrealistic expectations of you? Are there relationships where you're expected to abandon yourself, stay small, or keep showing up in ways that no longer feel true for you? And what would it look like to lay that down and step into something more real? Now, this is a great segue into the next basic right. Let's talk about the right to change your mind. Because sometimes what felt right yesterday or aligned yesterday doesn't feel aligned today. Maybe you made plans to see a friend, but now your body is asking for rest. Maybe you committed to something that at the time felt like a yes, but today something inside of you is saying no. And that doesn't make you unreliable. It means you're paying attention to yourself. You are allowed to change your mind and also be a person whose words and actions align. It's not black and white. I do say no. In fact, there was a time in my life where I was really going through something hard, and making plans in the future did not feel like the next kindest choice to me, because someone could call me up on a Monday, and that day I was feeling pretty good. And they're like, hey, let's go to happy hour on Saturday. Well, guess what? By the time Saturday rolled around, that is not the same energy I was in. I was back in my grief. I was back in my activation. And it didn't feel aligned for me to go do something like happy hour. So instead of bailing on everyone all the time, I decided to get ahead of it. And I just told a lot of my friends or anyone that was asking me to do something that required planning, because sometimes when we get older and we have families, we have to plan to see our friends and we go, okay, in 4 weeks, we're going to meet. But again, like, I don't know what I'm going to feel like in 4 weeks from now. So I got ahead of it and I would just say, hey, listen, I'm going through some stuff. I really can't commit to plans in the future right now. So I can say yes to this, or I can say yes to your event. But if for some reason, closer to the date, it doesn't feel aligned anymore, I am going to have to decline. So if that throws your catering estimate off or whatever was going on, please just count me as a no. And of course, it won't always be like this, but I need to take care of myself right now. And in fact, I had a friend who's going through a journey of hormone fluctuation. And I just said, hey, that might be a really great thing to do right now, is not make a lot of plans in the future, because you don't know where your hormones or your energy is going to be in the future. So that's just an example that, like, we can still be someone whose words and actions align, or someone who, shows up, and also be someone who has the right to change their mind. You can still be honest, you can still be clear, and you can still show up with integrity. Changing your mind isn't about backing out of responsibility. It's about being in relationship with the present version of you. What you know, what you feel, and what you might need in that moment. Sometimes that means that you have to update a decision. Sometimes it means having a hard but respectful conversation, like the example I just gave you. Sometimes it means noticing something that no longer fits and letting that be enough. I've definitely had to do this in big and small ways in my life. I've had to let go of roles that no longer felt aligned. I've had to send a text that said, hey, I know I said I was up for dinner, but I'm realizing that I actually need a quiet night. And I'm so sorry to let you know, so close to, but I'm not going to be able to make it. It doesn't feel aligned. And of course, that person can do the same thing for me. And because I now know how to manage my own disappointment, I don't need to take them hostage in my disappointment when they need to take care of themselves. So we can be both honest and evolving. And remember that we are growing and evolving and expanding. I have had clients that are like, okay, I've been in this job for 10 years and it feels like a failure if I leave now, but I'm miserable. I hate going to work every day. And the truth is that a past version of you chose that job or that relationship or that friendship, and it might not be aligned with the current version of you. So I want to give everyone permission to outgrow things, to change your mind. So I want you to think about it. Is there a yes you're still holding yourself to that doesn't feel true anymore? And what kind of freedom could you experience if you allowed yourself to check in and choose again? So on to our next basic right. Perfection is not the goal, wholeness is. So you have the right to make mistakes and learn from them, to grow, to course correct, to repair. We are all here doing the best we can with the tools and the information we have been given at the time. And sometimes those tools are incomplete. That doesn't make you bad. It makes you human. You are allowed to mess up. You're allowed to not know better until you do. You're allowed to be learning experientially, and you are still worthy even in your most imperfect moments. If love, respect, or acceptance is only offered when you're perfect, that's not love, that's control. And it teaches you to betray yourself in order to avoid disappointing others. You are going to get it wrong sometimes. You're going to say the wrong thing, miss the mark, forget what you've already healed. You're going to go back into old patterning. That doesn't mean you failed. It means that you are still learning and evolving. Mistakes do not mean you're unworthy. They're simply just feedback from the universe. An invitation to respond, realign, and keep moving forward with awareness, integrity, and authenticity. So this reminds me of when I taught kindergarten. And, when we work with 5 and 6-year-olds, they're making mistakes all the time and learning from it. And I remember doing parent teacher conferences, or God forbid, if a kid hit another kid, which that's a lot of sarcasm right there, because that's actually pretty age appropriate that kids are still learning social skills and how to interact with others. And, a child would have, make a mistake or something very age appropriate would come in or go on. And the parents would come in with like so much shame. Oh my God, my kid hit another kid or said this. And I would always reassure them like, oh yeah, that's exactly where they're supposed to be. And listen, if we all treated ourselves like we were 6, because we all have an inner 6-year-old that sometimes takes the wheel, I think that, I don't know, life would just be a lot more flexible and we'd probably be a lot better off. Like that same grace applies to adults. Listen, mistakes are where we learn the most. In fact, I don't actually believe in mistakes. I just believe that they're learning opportunities. And there was a time in my life, because shame has been a big part of my story, where I had done all this internal work, went out, drank too much, woke up the next day, opened up my eyes, and like the flood of like whatever I had done had like hit me like a wall. And the shame came like right in. And I know that it's shame because I want to disappear. Like I just want to like go under a rock. And I had this moment where I was like, oh, okay, right. Like I can continue to shame myself, or I could learn from this. And when I got curious, I actually pulled a whole lot of learning out. Like, that many drinks, never a good idea for me. Being around certain groups of people when consuming alcohol, also not very good for me. And at that time of my life and in my healing, like alcohol wasn't a kind choice for me at all. So I was actually able to pull all of this learning out and course correct and go forward and do it different. So in that moment, I decided like, okay, well, I can either shame myself or I can grow from it. And I made this internal pinky promise with myself, which was like, wow, there's really no more use for shame and guilt. If I use them as opportunities to learn and grow, that's just way more beneficial. So I pinky swore myself internally, hey, we're going to make an agreement that any and everything that happens in our life, we're going to learn from. And I've been doing it since. Let me tell you, a lot of learning in this life. So I want you to think about, is there a mistake that you've been carrying that's like a secret weight? And what would it feel like if you could shift that into not evidence that you're a failure or that you're not good enough, but as an opportunity to learn and grow? Okay, and now our last basic right. Keep in mind your nervous system is always speaking to you. And one of the clearest messages that it sends is this doesn't feel safe. So you have the right to protect your emotional safety, even when it's inconvenient, even when it confuses others, even when it disappoints the version of you that used to tolerate more than you should. You have the right to choose relationships, jobs, environments, and conversations that feel safe to your body and your nervous system. You have the right to step away. You have the right to end conversations. You have the right to end relationships, to set boundaries, to say, hey, you know what? This isn't good for me now. You are not obligated to stay in places where you are chronically dismissed, harmed, criticized, or gaslit. You are not responsible for making unsafe spaces feel okay just because someone else wants you to stay in them. And here's the truth. Protecting your emotional safety is definitely not selfish. It is sacred. It is your greatest responsibility in this life. And sometimes it might sound like silence. Sometimes it might sound like a boundary. Sometimes it might sound like walking away with no explanation at all. But your peace is worth protecting, even if no one else understands why you need to protect it. So I want you to think, where is your nervous system whispering, this isn't safe? And are you listening? Can you get curious? And what would it look like to honor that signal instead of overriding it? So, we did it. We went through all 7. So let's take a deep breath together. And I'm going to repeat these back to you. I would love, now, if you're driving, please don't do this. But if you're not, I would love for you to put a hand on your heart, close your eyes, and just receive this list. I'm going to say them out loud. I have the right to say no without carrying guilt. I have the right to be treated in a way that I feel is respectful. I have the right to have needs, and they are as valuable as the needs of others. I have the right to not have to meet other people's unrealistic expectations of me. I have the right to change my mind. I have the right to make mistakes and to learn from them. And I have the right to keep myself emotionally safe. You do not have to earn these. You just have to believe that they're true for you. Now, when I teach these to clients, I usually get one of 3 reactions. One is, oh my gosh, thank you. Like, you just gave me permission. I'm taking these and I'm running back into my life and relationships and I'm owning them. The second response is like, sure, Robin. Yeah. Oh, these are my basic rights. Sure. Okay. Right. Like, sounds like a bunch of BS and fantasy thinking that I could actually ask for these in my life and relationships and own them. And the third, sometimes people get sad and sometimes grief comes up because there's some sadness around the fact that, like, I can't believe I'm 45 and I didn't know that these were true for me. I can't believe that, I grew up my whole life and it was never mirrored back to me that I had enough worth to ask for these in my relationships. So just know that if any of those reactions come up, it's so normal. This episode, just like every episode, is about getting curious. You do not have to go run with these and jump into your life and start setting boundaries everywhere. You don't even have to believe they're true for you. But I want you to at least let them start talking to you. Okay. So when I work with clients, I always say, hey, print out this page with the basic rights on it and stick it on your bathroom mirror. I love a good Post-it note or something on your bathroom mirror because it's a high traffic area, at least for me. Like, I'm brushing my teeth 2 times a day or more. I'm putting on makeup. I'm washing my face. It's just something, it's a place that I'm seeing. When I stick things on my bathroom mirror, I'm seeing it often. And what this list is here to do is to bring consciousness to the places that you are bargaining with your worth. Because when it's on our bathroom mirror and we see it daily, then we go into a relationship and we go, basic right number 3 is not happening. Because that's what consciousness does. It shines a light in the darkness and it wakes us up to things that are way harder to go back to sleep after they're illuminated. So lucky for you guys, on my website, robinbreckenridge.com, there's a free download with your basic rights. So I'm inviting everyone, go to the website, download it. It's cute. It's powerful. Print it out, stick it on your bathroom mirror. Let these basic rights start talking to you. And let's see what happens. Because everything that I teach in this work, I've used myself. It has helped me. So in the 10-year journey of teaching boundaries, I got to a place where I went, we need a pause before I just hop everybody into this boundary system. Because like I said earlier, if you don't believe that you have the right to matter, and take up space and have limits in your life, boundary setting is a bust. It's going to feel like you're climbing Mount Everest on your own. That's not what we're here to do. Okay, so these emotional rights are the foundation of your boundary setting. They are your baseline. Your inner yes and your inner no start here. If you have ever struggled with setting or holding boundaries, which I'll assume everyone on this planet has, start here. Start by reclaiming your right to exist, to feel, to have needs, and to protect yourself. And if no one ever told you this before, you matter. You are not too much. You're not wrong for having limits and needs. You're not selfish for choosing and caring about your inner peace. So I want to leave you with this little reminder that you can come back to anytime. I protect my peace like it's sacred because it is. I choose honesty over guilt, alignment over approval. I don't chase spaces that I have to shrink inside of, not anymore. I don't earn love, I receive it where it's safe to land. I am allowed to take up space, to ask for what I need, and to walk away from the things that dim my light. My boundaries are a reflection of my worth, and I honor both. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this work, for reclaiming your space in the world. In our next episode next week, we are diving into the boundary pyramid, which is my signature framework for understanding the different categories of boundaries and how to honor them based on the depth and safety of your relationships. So we're going to get there. Again, I don't even know how many episodes I'm going to do on boundaries because there's just so much content that we can cover. But for now, I want you to take care of you. My invitation for this episode, which I have been listening back to these episodes, and I noticed that I'm interchanging the words session and episode because these feel like sessions to me. There's just a bigger audience, and I can't see your faces, but hopefully one day soon I will be able to see some of your faces. Because you matter, and you matter to me, and how you feel matters to me, and your emotional safety matters to me. So go to my website, robinbreckenridge.com. Go print out your 7 basic emotional rights. Let's start owning them. Let's start reclaiming them. And then next week, we're going to get into how do we actually set boundaries and apply them in our lives? So I'll see you next week. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this work. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Come connect with me over on TikTok at Robin Breckenridge or Instagram at Coach with Robin, where I share even more insights, tools, and conversations around boundaries, self-trust, relational healing, and so much more. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and personal growth purposes only. The insights and tools I share are based on my experience as a life and relationship coach and are meant for general guidance. Each person's story is unique, and the nuances of individual experiences can't always be addressed in this format. What's shared here may not be applicable to every situation, especially those involving abuse, oppression, severe mental illness, or systematic harm. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please seek support from a qualified mental health professional or emergency resources. Thank you for listening and for showing up for yourself in this way. Take care, and I'll see you next time.